Alright, hi everyone, we're live. I got some juice for you today. I get to subject you all to my speed game. So we're just going to be playing the arcade mode, which is forward in comparison to the career. Hold on. Just got the chat up so I can see what you're saying.
So let me edit.
Yeah, so this is very simple compared to career. This is just pretty straightforward driving.
Wait. I never got it started.
Oh, that's fine.
Yeah, alright.
So yeah, I'm just going to be like driving some laps. There's a few races which I'm going to explain because they're slightly different, but aside from this, this is pretty much just a speedrun where like racing well is the key. There's not really much RNG or any like weird things that can get in your way, aside from like the strange physics this game has. It's mostly just down to you. So the way this works is there are 11 arcade series in this game. Each one has 5 races. Four of them are available to us in each series, and you only need 3 to continue, so we essentially just do the 3 quickest ones. So right now we're in the novice series. We do race 2, 3 and 4, I think. I'm gonna have to like check that, but yeah. So I'm starting out with number 4 just because I always start out with the punter race. And again, yeah, really simple. So next up I'm going to be driving a Celica, which I think is race number 2. Yep. And this one is like even more simple, it's just an oval essentially. A lot of this just comes down to how you use your nitrous and how efficiently you can use it. It's always good to nitrous off the line. I always use my nitrous here on this sharper, like, second corner. And a good first lap for this race is a sub 26, sub 36, and that was like a 36-second lap, that's fine. Again, there's not really much to say about this race, it's incredibly simple. There's only one turn of note and it's this one, because I used the nitrous here. And a good second lap is a sub 32, and that was a sub 32. So next up we have a sprint race, so this is a different type of event. These are best of threes, kind of. It's got like a heat system, and you get points depending on when you come. This is incredibly simple. And one thing to pay attention to here is you can only like skip through the menus once everyone has crossed the finish line, so how you drive here doesn't even matter. See, I was only able to skip through the menus there once all of the AI drivers had crossed the line, so really I have no input in how fast this goes. It's just how the worst AI driver drives, it's down to that. So in terms of this, like, I have no input if whether this race is time save or time loss, it's all just down to how the AI feels like driving. So after this is done, this will be the end of the novice series. And now we have the Juice Game series, so this is 2 out of 11. And this starts out with a race in a Vauxhall Corsa, the slowest car in the game. And this race is incredibly unpredictable. I'll demonstrate why. So, the physics in this game, sort of can be a bit dodgy around curbs. So you'll see if I go over this curb, the car bounces quite a lot. So, despite the fact this car is very slow, going over all these curbs to try and cut these corners as tight as possible, it causes the car to bounce quite a lot, which is very difficult to control, despite my low speed. So yeah, despite the fact that this Corsa very slow, otherwise very easy to control. The fact all of these curves are everywhere on this course makes this one of the more difficult ones to control. Aside from that, this track layout is relatively simple. The more interesting races, with more to say about, come later on in the run. At the moment we're just driving mostly front-wheel drive cars. I guess that's something I should mention. Front-wheel drive cars, rear-wheel drive cars, and all-wheel drive cars in this game all handle very differently. So right now we're mostly driving front-wheel drive cars. Our first rear-wheel drive car encounter will be an MX-5 slightly later on. But I guess there's not really a way I can describe it, but if you think of like real-life front-wheel drive cars are more susceptible to understeer, and that is kind of the case with this game. But it's definitely like front-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and all-wheel drive cars, they all feel like they've got their own kind of distinctive handling model. All-wheel drive cars being by far the easiest to control for like beginners. Because they just grip.
Some of the rear-wheel drive cars are really bad to
Yeah.
drive. You like, you turn a little bit too far and then just you're gone.
Yeah, we'll get to some of those later, including the notorious Viper. This is Juiced. This is the speed game that I play. It's kind of a fairly nondescript racing game from the mid-2000s. I want to say that Juice 2 was more popular, like its sequel probably superseded this a little bit. So this is possibly the most boring race in the entire game. I mean not the entire game, I mean the entire run. This is the prelude race. This course is just kind of like a square or a rectangle, and you just kind of drive it. The only notable parts about this course are the corners, of which there are 4. And you take all of these in 5th gear. I figured this out fairly recently. 5th gear is the way to go for all of these. And then you just use your nitrous to get back up to top speed. Like so. But aside from this, there's really not much to say. It's very hard to try and optimize this course just because of how simple it is, unfortunately. So yeah, I guess I'll mention, since I'm not really doing much now, this game, the arcade mode is by far like the best speed game as it currently stands. So if you're interested in playing this game like as a speed game, I think, like, this is my opinion, but I think this is a fairly widely shared opinion. Arcade mode is the way to go, because career is just full of RNG, and runs are pretty frustrating of that. Whereas this is just all about your driving, how well you can drive, how consistent you can be across like an hour-and-a-half run. Whereas if you want to sign yourself up for copious amounts of RNG, then you can play the career.
Yeah, the differences between the runs on speedrun.com are kind of ridiculous.
Yep. The career in this game, I'm actually kind of glad I'm not playing it, because that would involve a lot of explaining. It's very nuanced. Like with the whole respect system, there's a lot to explain about the career. Whereas with this, I can just say, well, hey, I'm just doing some racing. This is fairly easy to read. Right, so next up is a race in a Dodge Neon, which is number 4. You'll hear me saying, like, this is race 4, because that's the position of the race, like, in the menu. And that's how I remember the route. Yeah, I felt like a broken record at this point, but this race isn't particularly interesting. We'll get to the more interesting races as the run goes on. No, you don't need to race every race in each stage 7. Only 3 of the 4 which are available to you right from the beginning. That's why this is arcade any percent. If you were to do all of the races in each series, that would be arcade 100%. Which I actually did a run of like last night. Yeah, so the most interesting part about this course is the last couple corners. That's where you've got to pay the most attention. Aside from that, the roads are incredibly wide. You're pretty much at max speed for the entire time.
No 7. Actually no. Microwav, you can explain the requirements to go through each.
I just did explain.
Level. Arc.
Actually, one thing to mention though is the grand final series, so series number 11, the final one, we have to do all 5 of the events, because only once you finish grand final series number 5 will you get the prompt from the game saying you've completed the arcade. So for that one we have to finish all of the events. Which means that the grand final series takes up about a third of the run. Like, you get to about an hour in, and that's when the grand final series starts. And this is only about an hour and a half long run. Because the grand final series is home to the longest races in the game. Also, probably the hardest races in the game overall. But we have to do all of it for the arcade to be considered completed. So yeah, like I said, the most interesting part of this course are these last few corners. Because this is the only bit you really have to concentrate for. So after this is done, this will be the end of the Juice Game series, and we'll be going into the Midnight series, where all of the races are at night, surprisingly enough. And this one is 1, 2, 3, so I can just spam through the menus. That's one thing I'll say. You can just, if the race order you're going for is just 1, 2, 3, it will select the next race after the one you've already completed, so you can just spam through the menus. So this used to be one of my favorites in the entire run, but I discovered during some of my practice runs that you can do all of the corners in this one in 5th gear, and then after I discovered that, I do not like this one anymore, because it's a lot easier to go wrong if you stay in 5th gear for all of these corners. But it is faster, especially if you have nitrous to get yourself back up to top speed. But you can see they're like going over the curbs, very bumpy. Front wheel drive cars, when you go over curbs like that, you're most likely to just bump around. Rear wheel drive cars, you're more likely to just spin out. Spin outs are big time losses in this game. Spin outs are probably like the biggest like single time losses that you can come across in this, because there's no like crash cams, for example. So yeah, spin outs are mostly like the big time losses, and those come most commonly in rear wheel drive cars. And hopefully I won't have to demonstrate one to you. That was a good corner right there. We've got a fairly good free. A lot of this run is all about nitrous preservation and how you can like use it equally across all of the laps in a circuit. Like, there are some tricks where you'll be losing quite a lot of time if you didn't save nitrous for like a long straight, for example, or like after a tight corner. So it's always important you have nitrous when you need it. So next up is a race in the Honda CRX, and I get to introduce to you another, like, infamous part of racing games that seems to pop up, which is the wall grind. This game has wall grinds in the run. Also, it's very important in this one that you get ahead of the AI early. If you don't, then you can easily get stuck behind them, and it's kind of difficult to avoid roads. The way to get nitrous quite a lot right off the line. But it's very easy to not do that and then just get stuck behind them. So the wall grind here is on the corner, and wall grind show up quite a lot in this run. And like I said, the physics for each type of car is different: front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, and all wheel drive. And these free drivetrains react very differently to wall grinds. Rear wheel drive cars, you're very likely to spin out in some of them if you wall grind. But front wheel drive cars, you're pretty much safe. This is by far the friendliest wall grind in the run. Because the Honda CRX, obviously, if you're familiar with cars, is a front wheel drive car. So my goal for this run, I've kind of been slaving over this on my own channel, on like doing practice runs, is to get a sub 130. My PB, I think it's a 127.50, and that's old. That I don't know if you guys like can relate to this, but this is one of those PBs that I got like a year and a half ago, and then I took a break from the game, and when I came back I was like, how the hell did I manage to do that? It's like a god run, and I have no idea like what I was on. Because since I've been doing practice runs and I've come back to playing this game more recently, I've not really got anywhere close to my PB. I've got within like 50 seconds, and that's about as good as I've gotten. But for a marathon run of this, my goal is a sub 130, which I think is a fairly realistic goal. So also just incredibly simple. What's notable about this is that this is the first rear-wheel drive car we drive in the run. Thankfully, this is just an oval circuit. It's like NASCAR except we're turning right. So, yeah, you don't really feel the effects of this being a rear-wheel drive car, just because of how simple the circuit is. Otherwise, the MX-5 really sucks, unfortunately. I know a lot of people like the MX-5, but this car is actually one of the worst in the game. For the class that it's in, the career mode in this game has kind of like a class system. So for the class that this car's in, it's like one of the worst choices, unfortunately. So for this, kind of similar to what I was doing in the Celica race right at the beginning of the run, I just nitrous around that tightest corner, or I aim to at least. But yeah, it's very easy to oversteer in this car, as it is with like most rear-wheel drive cars, but it rarely ever happens here just because of how simple this layout is. So yeah, I mostly just try to use my nitrous around this corner. I'm very kind of apprehensive using my nitrous around that corner of potentially just the car going into a spin. I don't know if this really shows by just watching this, but cars can especially the rear-wheel drive ones, cars can very easily just kind of spin out without really giving you any warning. Especially if you're nitrousing around a corner. Alright, so that was the end of the Midnight series. I think now we go into the Challenge series, if I remember correctly. Yep, Challenge series. Not to be confused with the game mode from the... So these sort of showcase some of the other types of racing in this game. This is just a lap time. So this is just one lap, and yeah, we just drive this Corolla around this circuit. This one's actually kind of hard to use all of your nitrous. Just because of how short this is. This is literally like just over 40-second lap on a very short course, so gotta make sure you use up all your nitrous like as soon as possible, otherwise you're gonna finish with some left over. I always save some for this final corner, yeah. That was a pretty solid Corolla. I usually aim for a 41-second lap here. Alright, so next up is number 3. This is a perfect lap race. This one's always a bit nerve-wracking. If we touch the wall here, then we lose, and we'd have to restart. So I always play this one very safe, and especially now, since this is like by nature a no reset run, I'm going to be playing this one very safe. I think one thing to mention, I know I said if we touch a wall we lose, one thing to mention is that that isn't technically the case. What happens here is if I take damage to my car, I lose. But obviously the easiest way to do that is to touch a wall. There are cases where the game can be like a bit lenient and weird with how it registers damage, so I could potentially touch a wall and the game not register that as my car being damaged and I'd still be fine. But you know, I'm not taking any chances here, right? Again, this is fairly simple. I have nitrous left over, which is kind of a shame. I aim for usually a 107 here. That was a high 107, so slightly below average. Okay, so now we have a Beetle. This is a speed challenge. This is the only time that this one shows up in the run. I'm going to stay above the target speed, which is 60 miles an hour. Yeah, I'm sorry, I played the game in miles per hour. I know a lot of you guys are like European and use kilometers. So yeah, just as long as I stay above 60 miles an hour, I'm fine, and this isn't difficult at all. This is a very simple layout. The hardest part of this is like the first couple corners. But after you get past the first couple corners, you're essentially fine. These speed challenges show up way more commonly in the career mode of the game. And that is the end of the challenge series, one of the shorter ones in the run. Now we have the point-to-point series. This is another type of race this game has to offer, although it's really not that complicated. It's kind of just in the title, point-to-point. I expect other games sort of refer to these as sprint races, but then sprint races in this game are drag races. So yeah, this is just a sprint race, if that's how you want to call it. So we're driving the Volkswagen Corrado. This is another one of those cars where the physics are kind of odd. It's still front wheel drive, of course, but this car's just kind of bizarre in its handling. Sometimes it understeers, sometimes it oversteers. You can't really read it. It's very hard to kind of get a feel for this car. Definitely one of the more difficult front-wheel drive cars to control. Also, you might notice I haven't gone below fourth gear here. The gear ratios in some of these cars are a little bit odd, and the way they accelerate is a bit odd, so for some cars it's fine to just like never go below the top 2 gears. And another example of that will be coming up right now as I drive the Ford Focus. The other Ford Focus. There's 2 Ford Focuses in this game. You've got like the sedan version and the hatchback version. And you'll see me in this one taking really tight corners in 4th gear. Like right at us. See, and I'm like, despite the fact I was going really slow around that tight corner, I was still fairly high up in the rev range, so there was no need to go down into 4th. It's just a quirk of how like the gears work in this game, I suppose. Some cars are like this. And the car actually coming up next as well, which will be another Celica, although a different Celica to the one I was driving earlier, that car also has an issue with the gearbox where it revs higher than it looks like it's revving. So you can kind of go way into the red. .107 along there is good. That looked like it was a 107 at least. It might have been a low 108, but still that was fine. So if you pay attention to the rev whilst I'm driving, you might be able to see that it kind of goes like way too high up. But that's kind of how you're supposed to drive this car. Only drive this car is to have the needle like right at the edge of the rev limiter, and this is one of the only cars to be like this. So this is one of the shorter races in the run. The entire point-to-point series here is just incredibly short. It kind of comes with the nature of them being like not lapped races. So we're already done with the point-to-point series. Next up is the import series, I think. I'm trying to remember this off by heart just from my practice. I'm pretty sure it's the import series. So import series is 234. And we'll see another perfect lap race here, which I will explain once I get to it. This is just a fairly plain race in a Civic. There are a couple corners here which are notable. Mostly the one I'm coming up to, because of how tight this is. And also the final corner. It's very easy to take this final corner too wide and misread it. Gotta try and take it as inside as possible. I also realised I used way too much of my nitrous on lap 1. That's fine though. It shouldn't be too much of a time loss overall. So the import series is sort of where we get to say goodbye to the front-wheel drive cars. After this point they're mostly going to be rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. Front-wheel drive cars, I think the arcade, the developers, they must have considered these to be like the beginner cars. They are the slowest cars in the game. Of course, if you know cars, you'll know that there aren't really that many super fast front-wheel drive cars out there. So after this series, it's going to be the modern V8 series, where we start to run into muscle cars, which are rear wheel drive. And we get our first taste of rear-wheel drive cars, aside from the MX-5 at the end of this series. This game just lacks in the rear-wheel drive compartment in lower classes. Yep, that is kind of true. I mean, you've got the MRS and the MR2, but aside from that, the MX-5, not really much in the way of choices. So this one is 234. I forgot there for a sec. Don't want to do number 1 because number 1 is incredibly long. So this is in it was either in RSX or an Integra. It's the same classic racing game where they include both Acura and Honda, but it's like the same car twice. Yeah, it is the SRT4 N prototype. It's the highest BHP front-wheel drive car in the game. So this is another race with a wall grind. This is one of my favorite races in the run, because it's got a cool wall grind there. And it's also got those, like, 2 really tight corners. like right here. I think this is pretty cool. Used up slightly too much nitrous here on lap 2, but I still have enough to suffice for lap 3. I carried a bit too much speed. You can see my car properly going up on 2 wheels there though. Just a quirk of like the physics in mostly front wheel drive cars. Alright, so now I get to drive the MRS, which this race is one of the scariest in the entire run, because it's a perfect lap challenge so you can't damage it, and this car is absolutely horrible to control. It will spin out on you at like literally any moment without really any warning. Thankfully this is only 1 lap, so I can drive it incredibly safely and it's not a huge time loss. Yeah, this is literally snap oversteer. I know these cars are like notorious for their snap oversteer, and funnily enough, they programmed it into the game. So yeah, super slow driving, but I wouldn't want to play this risky. I usually... Well, it depends. Depends how risky I'm playing it. I usually get 41-second laps here, though. So now we have the modern V8 series. And this is just another lap time. So now we're driving rear-wheel drive cars mostly. We don't see a front-wheel drive car again past this point.
I was front wheel.
Rear-wheel drive. So yeah, this is a fairly simple lap. This isn't a perfect lap, so I can crash into walls here and not be worried about it. I usually aim for like a 39-second lap here, so that was really slow, but that's fine. Now this is another one of the scarier races in the run, the Camaro race. This one's a notable playing automatic, which I'm pretty sure this one starts you off in 4, just because of like amount of power this car has. Obviously automatic not really so great in this game. The stream went down? That's fine.
No, the stream didn't go down. Like everything just froze. Like a solid like 2 seconds. I'm like, don't do this now. It's like fucking 3 in the morning, dude.
Yeah. So yeah, this is one of the scarier races in the run, mostly because of that wall grind that I just did. This car's kind of difficult to control. It's not the worst. I've definitely kind of got to grips with it over my practice runs, but that wall grind can really mess with you. So one thing to note about that wall grind, this track is kind of centered around that wall grind and how well you can do it, but one thing to mention about it is that you've got to kind of steer into it. So it's a left turn, but when you go into the wall grind you steer right. So you're like deliberately grinding yourself up against the wall as much as possible, because if you steer left into that wall grind you're very likely going to spin out. Whereas with the CRX wall grind I did earlier, because it's front wheel drive, you had to, that was a right turn and you have to steer right into that wall grind. It's all about the drivetrain of the car and how that affects it. So good laps around this circuit are like 58 and 59 second laps. Obviously lap 1 was a 104 because, you know, starting from a standing start. This section's kind of bumpy. You can see there's like a tiny amount of airtime there. It's always possible to mess that section up, as well as these curbs here that you've got to go over. But all in all, this has been a very good Camaro race. Which is good, because this one can easily go wrong if you're not experienced with it. So next up is the Firebird race. The Firebird race is just a, like, I think a 6-lap figure 8 race. The Firebird I consider to be even more difficult to control than the Camaro, despite the fact they're very similar cars. I'm pretty sure they differently and they're not just like copy-paste. So it's kind of appreciated that this is such a simple circuit, like it's just a figure 8. Kind of important to get ahead early here. I probably should have used more nitrous than what I did. I used to shift down into 5th around that first corner, but now I stay in 6th, which is a bit riskier, but you preserve more speed. The car definitely feels like it wants to spin out more though if you stay in 6th around this corner. Like you see there, I'm like the rear end's probably coming out around that corner sometimes. It's mostly just down to how well you can correct it. Not really many great places to use your nitrous here. Mostly because of the risk involved in nitrusing around a corner with a car as unpredictable as this one. So you really want to save your nitrous just for the straights. There's also a bridge, so you don't really want to nitrous over the bridge because you're not going to be gaining anything if you're nitrusing whilst you're in mid-air. Nice RX-7, thanks dude. So yeah, this is kind of the only real nitrous spot on the circuit. The only viable one, really. I'm sure someone could, like, be totally crazy, use the nitrous around turn number 2, and use it efficiently and save a bunch of time, but that sounds risky as heck, so I am not going to learn how to do that. So all in all, this has been a decent Firebird race. And this signifies the end of the modern V8 series. Up next, I think, is the all-wheel drive series. So we get a taste for some of the all-wheel drive cars in the game. Yep. So this starts out with 2 Subaru races, one in a 22B and then one in a WRX STI. This one is pretty boring, considering how far we are into this run. This is one. There are 2 corners which you need to pay attention to, but aside from that, it's mostly just kind of straight line, like fast driving. So the 2 corners are these 2 tight ones. I don't have the mini-map on so you can't see, but like 2 tight corners here, that's one of them, and then there's another one which we'll be coming up to. I realised I probably could have turned the minimap back on because I don't have my whole layout, which I usually have on my own stream. I usually put things down in the bottom left where the minimap would be. And I save all my nitrous for after the tight corners to get myself back up to a good speed again. It's very easy to try and cut those tight corners as close as possible and just crash into the wall, which is probably like the biggest time loss you can have on this course, is getting a bit too confident with these corners and just crashing like right into them. But then you also lose yourself a bunch of time if you take them too wide, so yeah, those corners are kind of risky regardless of how you play them. There's definitely like a optimal way to take those corners which involves quite a precise corner. There we go, that was a good example of how to take that corner. And then you nitrous out of it. Not really much I can say here. Thankfully, coming up next is a slightly more interesting race. And that is the WRX STI race. I usually refer to this one as the Impreza race, and then I refer to the one which I just did as the 22B race, to differentiate them. There is, in the all-wheel drive series, a race in a Evo. I think it's like an Evo 6, I forget which. There's 2 Evos in this game. One's I think an Evo 8, and then the other one's like an Evo 6, I think, if I remember correctly, and that race...
Correct.
Nice. That race in the Evo 6 is like 6 minutes long. I think it's 3 laps around one of the longest tracks in the game, so we definitely do not take that one. So as you can see there, I forgot to point it out, I just kind of did it on instinct. There are 2 wall grinds on this one. Like back to back. The 2 consecutive wall grinds. And because these are all-wheel drive cars, the wall grinds are pretty... All-wheel drive cars, nice and grippy, don't about spinning out grinds. Done it like once or twice before, but aside from that, it's largely safe. I guess one thing I can introduce, because it might happen, is this game has damage, and this will become more important later on, but there is potential that I will get nitrous leak. So there are 3 stages of damage in this game. There is nitrous leak, where you lose all your nitrous slowly, then steering damage, which is like having no dead zone. The car like steers off to one side, and then there is turbo damage, so you lose your turbo, which you lose a bunch of top speed because of that. The only real threat for most of the run is nitrous leak, except for the final race in the game where steering damage can be a potential issue. I generally try to use most of my nitrous before these final two wall grinds, but I forgot. It's easy to get nitrous leak. Yeah, there we go. See, since I didn't use all my nitrous before that final wall grind, I got nitrous leak there. Except I only had like a tiny amount of nitrous left, so it didn't really leak all that much at all. One thing to note is that you can still use your nitrous whilst it's leaking. So it's very tempting if you've got a nitrous leak just to like hold down the nitrous whilst it's running out. So you don't, you know, lose anything. But that can be very risky, and that's kind of ill-advised. Right, so next up is a race in the Evo 8. This one also has a wall grind in it. Doing the wall grind on this 2 and 3, because for lap getting ahead of the wall grind that we do here on lap 2 and 3 is literally this first corner. So for lap 1 it's kind of, you don't have enough speed and there's also guys in the way, so we just focus on taking this corner normally for the first lap. Also, this guy in the Evo behind me, he tends to want to nitrous along the straight and then ram into my rear end, but not in this instance, it looks like. He is right up behind me still though. He doesn't, he's not a threat though. On normal difficulty, for me in the arcade mode, no races here are actually like difficult for me. The difficulty, it's got, you can choose between difficulty. Difficult, I'm alright at it because I, you know, play this game tons, so. But like, it would definitely throw off beginners. So for lap 2 and 3 we do the wall grind like I mentioned. And that saves quite a lot of time actually, because otherwise that's a fairly tight right angle corner. Since I mentioned difficulty, I've actually yet to do an arcade any % run on hard difficulty and see how much time it loses. I know for a couple courses it would probably save time, because since the AI would be driving better, you'd have no chance of lapping them, where in some of the races in normal difficulty, it's pretty much guaranteed that you're going to lap the AI and they'll potentially get in your way as you try to overtake them. So on hard difficulty that wouldn't be an issue. So for this section we stay in 5th gear. If we have nitrous then I stay in 5th gear. This is incredibly slow and tight. If you have nitrous then you can get yourself like back up high in the rev range really quickly. Lap record I have, so your lap records in this game are saved in a file in your save folder, and I've got a file dedicated to like this category, and that was a lap record, so that was a really good lap 2. This isn't going to be as good of a lap 3 though, because I don't have nitrous for the final section. So I'm probably going to end up shifting down into 4th for this final section here, if need be. Solid lap 3. Is it the American muscle? This one starts off with a sprint. This sprint actually has slightly more strategy to it. You want to get up into 4th gear, which is top gear for this car, and then you want to hit the nitrous then. Otherwise, if you use it right off the line, you're going to be like spinning your wheel inefficient. Otherwise, this isn't all that difficult. And again, since this is a sprint race, I don't really control any time save here. or any potential time loss. It's all just about how well the worst AFs through this menu until every... And then usually for Heat 3 I get 2 drivers get in my way instead of the usual 1. Yeah, see there's 2 of them ahead of me now. So this can be a little bit tricky because you got to get like in between them. But other than that it's fine. Since this is kind of like a best of 3 situation, you can actually afford to come second on one of these. Alright, the Corvette race. This one's pretty difficult. Mostly just down to how this car controls. Because it's in the rain and this circuit has some weird corners like this one. And yeah, this car is very prone to like spinning, and I've got a fairly good grip, like a fairly good grip run. But you can see there, even I was like oversteering quite a lot into that corner. That was pretty bad. It was fine though, it wasn't like a huge mistake. I just got a weird line going into that corner. It's also important to remember, like I said, this track has some curbs in it, and rear-wheel drive cars and curbs can easily lead to spin-outs. So if you see me being kind of playing it kind of safe, being a bit tentative around the curbs, then that's why. It's pretty much a death sentence if one of your rear tires clips a curb whilst you're taking a corner. That will always lead to a spin out in a rear-wheel drive car or an all-wheel drive car. You want to make sure you've either got like all of your wheels on the curb or none most of the time. Otherwise the physics might just decide you need to spin out. Alright, so next up is the Dodge Charger race. There's a wall grind in this one. I know a lot of what I'm saying is just like every race. I'm like, hey, it's this race, there's a wall grind in this one. But that definitely is the case with this run. Like a lot of these circuits are kind of centered around the wall grind. One thing I did earlier in my arcade 100% run was do what I just don't usually do. It's like a strat which I could implement. Try not to do the wall grind on lap 1 because there are AI drivers in the way and the focus is to just try and get ahead. But it looks like that's actually quicker to do the wall grind around the AI drivers, which is good to know. So yeah, muscle cars in this game. If you haven't realized in this race and the last one, for muscle cars with high amounts of power, which these cars have, you pretty much need third and fourth gear. Second and first just never really go used.
Yeah, it's like the it's like that like, yeah, it's like just auto just skips to fourth. It's like
yep.
Nothing else is.
Alright.
Try this. There we go, fixed. Alright, easy, done.
Alright, cool. So yeah, this one's incredibly simple. The strategy here is to get up to 6th gear like we did with the muscle car sprint, and then hit the nitrous. Because the acceleration on the Supra is already pretty good, so nitrosing up through the through gears 1 through 6, just it's not efficient if you do it with nitrous. So you just wait until you get up to 6th and then you hit the nitrous. Whereas the AI drivers, they use nitrous, and you can see they don't rate that much quicker than I am, despite the fact they're using nitrous. See, like, I'm kind of keeping pace with them despite the fact they're using nitrous. Until I get up into 6th, and then I hit the nitrous and overtake them all. Bro, is that a Supra? Yeah, it is. In fact, this is one of 2 orange Supras we will be seeing this run. If the audio was muted, it's probably cut off, so I'm gonna say again, this is the penultimate series in the run. The final one is the Grand Final series, which I said earlier is incredibly long. It takes up like a third of the... So yeah, we're approaching kind of the end of the Japanese Supercar series, so we're going to be entering into the final series fairly soon, but it does take up a really long amount of time, and there is another Supra in the Grand Final series. So now we get to do a show-off event. First result in the run. This is like you do tricks in your car. It's like nothing we can do about this. But you get to see me do some cool moves. You can see there's a point system there. That probably shows up on stream. I know the display's like made a bit smaller because of the layout, but yeah, I think that should show up on stream. You see my points up there in the top right. I think I've got to get to 250,000. I think that's it. And this is really simple. This used to be like a run killer for me about 2 years ago, and then I got good at these events, and now I'm fine. In fact, I'm doing this pretty badly. I can usually get this done in like half a minute, but you know I'm talking, so not paying the greatest deal of attention. Oh yeah, if you crash into walls at high speed, you get a wipeout and you lose some of your combo. So yeah, with that one max speed 360, I got 300,000 points, which was enough to beat the point score. It's first time seeing this game, you have Juice 2 and you think this one's better. I think that is the general consensus, that this one is better. Although I think Juice 2 is also like a pretty decent game.
Juice 2 plays nothing like Juice 1 though. Juice 1 feels more like a racing sim, and then Juice 2 feels like...
Yeah, they're very kind of different in their approach.
Very arcadey.
Yeah. So you can see I'm just driving around right now, not really doing much, because I've hit the point score which I need. So past this point, it's not worth actually doing anything. I could just park up. In fact, I'm gonna park up. I got a chain drift somehow. I forgot that was even a combo you could do. But yeah, I can just park up now and this is fine. We're just waiting for the timer in the top left to run out, so it's another half a minute. And surprisingly enough, this is actually one of the fastest events in this series, because obviously we've got 4 to choose from, so we pick the 3 quickest ones, and this is one of the 3 quickest ones. The other event which we could choose is actually longer than this, than 3 minutes long. It's a race in a NSX, a stock NSX. So it's actually easier just to do the show-off event, which is guaranteed 3 minutes. So this is the end of the Japanese Supercar series, and now we go into the Grand Final series where we do all 5 of these events, starting off with an RX-7. And these events are all pretty long. That had potential to be bad. It was looking like I might have got stuck behind the AI there, but I managed to pull off. This one is quite simple. This is another one where the hardest challenge is just the fact that this RX-7 is pretty hard to drive. Nice Firebird, nice one. Yeah, so the hardest challenge here is just keeping the car under control, except for this one corner. This one corner is really difficult to take well. Mostly because there's a curb on the inside which you can spin out really easy on if you clip it. So, yeah, you kind of want to just take that corner pretty safely. Make sure you don't go up on the pavement. See, I tried to go over the pavement there and it gets really bumpy and you kind of lose a lot of control. And that is theoretically the fastest way to take that corner, but you're then susceptible to all sorts of weird physics happening and most likely spinning out. That was an instance there where one of my rear tyres nearly clipped the curb, in which case I would have spun out, no questions asked. If you see that happening, you've got to really make sure that doesn't happen. Oh hey, a lap record. So that's kind of, whenever you see lap record, which has been twice during this run, that's kind of like me getting a gold, only it's just like for one lap, instead of the entire race. See that I do it because like I know it's quicker, but it's like very risky. I think you can tell just by how much, like by how fast you're going and how much the car bumps over that pavement. It's like many things could go wrong there. That was a good RX-7 race. I think overall this might be a decent pace run. So this is the Super race. I know for like beginners this one's very difficult because that guy over there, furthest left, is driving an Evo and we're driving a Supra, and the Supra is very slow. I'm sorry if you guys like the Supra, this car in this game really sucks. Like for the class that it's in and like the amount of power it has, this car really isn't all that great. Its handling is super drifty as well. For a rear-wheel drive car, it's actually pretty easy to control, it's just got really vague and drifty handling. Someone's already done the yo, is that a Supra joke? But yep, it is. It's Supra number 2. I know I said when I did the sprint race with the Supra this was Orange Supra 1 of 2, and this is Orange Supra 2 of 2. So yeah, essentially the reason this one's hard is because that one guy drives an Evo and it's an all-wheel drive car and the AI are really good at driving those, usually. and the Super is pretty bad, so yeah, that guy, if you're not like amazing at this game, can easily catch up to you and cause you issues on this one, which sucks if you're a beginner, because this is actually really deep into the run now, and this is like a potential run killer. I personally never have issue with this one anymore, but when I was first starting out running this category, I did lose runs to this one occasionally. This would probably be easier to see if I had the minimap on, because then you'd be able to see where the other guys are. So the way this works, the reason that Evo isn't right up behind me right now, is because there is usually a Honda NSX who takes second place, and it's mostly down to how long the Honda NSX AI driver can keep the Evo behind it before the Evo inevitably overtakes and then starts catching up to you. So within the time that the Evo is stuck behind the NSX, you want to create as much of a gap between you and the NSX as possible. I still have quite a lot of nitrous left going into lap 3. This course overall is one of the more fun ones to drive. This one very much rewards like good lines. If you can drive this one well, it's very satisfying to drive. All of the corners are very smooth, especially with the kind of drifty nature of this car's handling model. If you can take all the corners well, it just feels like a very smooth, kind of satisfying drive. Like that section, for example, with that roundabout there. Like those are pretty much like two right angle corners, but you can take it right through the middle. Yeah, nitrous in this game is like really over exaggerated, but it's a 2000s racer, what do you expect? You know, nitrous was like the super cool thing that all street racers had. And all of the street racing games of the time always made it seem much cooler than what it actually is. So now we drive an NSX, and I guess a notable thing about this one is that this is the first time a Viper shows up in a race. Aside from that, this race is wall grind central. There are 3 wall grinds in this one. I only do 2 of them in a run, mostly because one of them isn't really all that time save. Here, I just fling myself into this corner. Watch this. That is quicker, just to like ram yourself right into that corner. So that's less of a wall grind and more like a wall bounce. But you'll be seeing the other 2 wall grinds I do on this course. It's very easy to get nitrous damage or a nitrous leak on this one. Yeah, I never really thought about it. Imagine if there was a first-person cockpit view in this. It would look so silly. But yeah, my guy is definitely a crash test dummy in there. So this is a wall grind coming up at the end of this straight. This one's one of the more risky ones because of how tight it is. I took that very quickly, which is nice. Yeah, I have played Burnout Paradise. I really like Burnout Paradise. And then the next wall grind we do, I don't do it on lap 1 because the focus is getting ahead of the Viper at the beginning of the race. but the next wall grind is this one coming up here. Oh yeah, that game has no like actual drivers, does it? I forgot about that. Because like with some of the damage models in that game, because I think it's like soft body, so with some of the damage models the cars can be like proper caved in, and there'd be no way that like a human driver would actually be able to fit in that, where like the roof is like super low down if you've like rolled on your roof. I remember like a fan theory for Burnout Paradise that they're actually all just like remote control cars. That's why there's no drivers. Oh yeah, I forgot about the bikes. The bikes were a weird inclusion into that game. I remember when Burnout Paradise The Ultimate Box came out, which included the bikes, and it was like being advertised as if it was a brand new game, but it was essentially just like a small bike campaign. That was a really slow wall grind. That wall grind though, since that corner's so tight and you hit it with so much speed, it's really easy to spin out. So and this goes for all wall grinds, I'm always happier to take a slow wall grind than one that spins me out. Like that's kind of just my, that's kind of like a rule of thumb for wall grinds. Like you're gonna lose tons more time if you do it super risky and spin yourself out than play it safe and potentially like grind against the wall a bunch and lose a ton of speed. I used to speedrun Burnout Paradise. I never submitted a time. I did the category, I think, all billboards. I don't know if that's still on the leaderboards. But it was like, I don't know how many billboards there are on that game, but it was like you just went around the map collecting all of the billboards in like the starter car. That was super slow, but I was preventing myself from spinning out there, so it's fine. That was much better than spinning out. Yeah, 120 was the number that came to my mind as well. But I wasn't certain, so I didn't say it. So overall this has been a fairly solid NSX race. I generally consider it like a good NSX race if none of the wall grinds go like catastrophically bad, and none of them have yet. It's also fairly possible to get steering damage on this final wall grind since there's so many wall grinds in this race. But that's fine because the finish line is right up ahead, so if I get steering damage here then it's actually okay. And I didn't, but the final wall grind went fine, so that's great. I haven't played Burnout Paradise since the remaster came out. I played that like, I think that came out August, whatever year that came out, and then I played it for like all of August, and then I never played it again. Yeah, this game does have damage. It has 3 stages of damage. You have nitrous leak, and then you get steering damage, and then you get turbo damage. So this is a race in a stock Viper. This is to like introduce you to the Viper, I think. So no upgrades, but I think this is a good time to talk about the Viper in this game, since I have avoided really talking about it so far. This car is kind of notorious, if you know about this game, for just being incredibly difficult to control, especially once you start upgrading it. Like, taming the Viper is kind of like the ultimate challenge in this game. But yeah, this is a stock one, so it's fairly easy to control. You can tell it's still pretty fast. It has a lot of power. You can also spin it out still fairly easily if you stop paying attention. But aside from that, this is actually fairly simple to drive. The next race, which will be the final race in the run, is using a fully maxed out Viper, what's known as a prototype Viper in this game, and that is the hardest car to control in the game. But yeah, this car is another one which is fairly prone to like snap oversteer. Kind of just oversteer when you're not expecting it. And just kind of spinning out when you're not expecting it as well. So I always play this one kind of safe. You can see the AI like to wipe out a lot on this course. Literally 3 people in a row just spun out there. And that's mostly because they're driving pretty fast cars and this course is really bumpy and the AI aren't really so good at bumps. So yeah, usually I'd be saving my nitrous for after this sharp corner, but I don't have any nitrous because this is a stock Viper. And there are in the whole arcade for this game there are 3 races where you drive stock cars. There's one in the challenge series where you drive a stock Impreza 22B. There's one in the Japanese supercar series where you drive a stock NSX, and then there's this one in the grand final series where you drive a stock Viper. And this is the only one that shows up in the arcade any % run. That like little hill there where you get air, that can be super unpredictable, so I'm kind of just glad I never spun out there. Exhaust shake. Yeah, there's kind of like some intricate little details in this game which I never pay attention to. And so I'd like to mention, this area of the game is called Campbell Hills, and this is by far my favourite area. I think this place looks really nice. I would, if we're talking like, in game here, this is the place where I'd like to live the most, out of all the locations we visited. And I think in the game lore, this is where all the rich people live, so yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, actually, this does remind me a bit of classic NFS. I see what you mean. I hadn't considered that before. Like, I'm kind of getting Hot Pursuit vibes from this. Yeah, but I really like how there's like hot air balloons just everywhere. It's a very peaceful looking little village. Alright, so we're coming up on the final race in the run. For this final race, I'm sorry I'm probably not going to be talking all that much, because this is using the most difficult to control car in the game, and I need to focus. So here's the Viper again, only this time it is prototype. So it has fully maxed out upgrades. And this car is actually my strong suit, because this is the fastest car in the game, so we do all the ILs in this. So I have the most practice with this car. So yeah, this car is definitely like my strong suit, but also at the same time this is notoriously difficult to control. There are like countless posts on the Juiced forums from like 2005 of people asking how the hell you're supposed to control this car. It also doesn't help that this final race is 4 laps and on a circuit which is incredibly bumpy and pretty difficult to drive. Yeah, a big issue with this is that on PC, this game only officially supports D-input mode, and if you know anything about D-input controllers, it's very difficult to play precisely and carefully with that kind of input. It's definitely, if you want to control this car, you're definitely better off playing console, and not PS2. So, Xbox, essentially. So there's a wall grind here. This wall grind's risky because of how long this is. This is definitely one of the races where you're most likely to get steering damage. But that wall grind saves quite a lot of time, because otherwise that's a fairly slow right angle corner. There's actually a fair few wall grinds on this circuit which I don't do, because it would just increase the risk of getting steering damage, and we don't want that. One visual indicator, which I haven't actually mentioned yet, of how damaged your car is your neons. So you can see underneath the car I've got red neons, and if they start flashing, then you'll know we're like fairly close to nitrous leak. And then eventually I think they go out altogether, and it's just kind of like a good indicator of how damaged your car is. I'm not going to read that comment out, but that's really funny. Alright, so I go for the wall grind lap 3 as well. Oh, hey, that was a lap record, nice. I usually only go for the wall grind lap 2 and 4. At least in my practice runs, that's what I've been doing. But my damage was looking pretty good, so I'm going to play it super risky for you guys and do it all 3 laps, lap 2, 3, and 4. And this might end up in me getting steering damage. But so far I haven't even had a nitrous leak, so my damage is looking pretty good. Nah, that's a bit of a mistake. That's fine though. One thing about learning these tracks is you've got to learn where the bumpy parts are, because then you know where to avoid on the road. Alright, so I'm going to do the wall grind lap 4. And this shouldn't give me steering damage because I still have nitrous. Yeah, I just get nitrous leak. And I go right into an AI driver, who I had no way of knowing he was around that corner. If I had the minimap on, I would have been able to have seen. Yeah, so that's another issue we have when we play on normal difficulty for this final race. Very easily you can overtake the AI on lap 4, and they can become a hazard very easily. So you really want to just try and get past them as quickly and cleanly as possible. so they don't lose you a bunch of time. I'm doing a fairly decent job of getting around these guys. I usually have quite a big issue trying to get around these guys, but seems to be going alright today. And we're coming up on time. I think Crofty knows where time is on this, so I don't have to explain, but once this race ends, I'll get a prompt in the menu saying that arcade has been completed. Alright, so there we go. That was a really good final Viper race. Nice to see him getting better at that one. So time is now.
Alright, just waiting for the thing to catch up.
Alright.
On my end, 128.30.
Alright, that's pretty decent. I was actually, my prediction was a 128.30, kind of, by the time I got to the Grand Final Series, I was thinking that was kind of around the pace that I was on. So, I guess that's me for today. I guess I'd like to shout out Crofty because it's like, what is like 4 in the morning for you?
Yep.
Yeah, so shoutouts to you for like staying up all night and making this work.
No, thanks, dude.
And
I appreciate it.
Obviously shoutouts to the whole Juice community. I don't have a link to the Discord server on me like right now, but if you're interested, you can find it easily on speedrun.com.
Yeah, Juice Discord, yeah.
Yeah, it will just like go on the speedrun.com page and it will be like in the list. You know where Discord is on speedrun.com on the sidebar. So yeah, if you're interested. It's been great doing this run on a marathon. This is actually the first time I've done a run at a marathon, so...
That was a really solid time.
Yeah, it was actually really good for a marathon. I was looking for a sub 130 and that was a 128, so...
You got a lot more than that, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So next up is Driver, right? Driver San Francisco?
Yeah, DSF, yeah, by Jay Gorham, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I think that's me done